Therapy Geeks, a podcast by Luke McGibbon and Louise Taylor. So we were doing Dishonesty, I think.
Oh,
Yeah,
the lying bastards.
I know there's a lot to talk about, I suppose, isn't there?
Well, we're going to be here all day.
In the world at large, there's not exactly a shortage of dishonesty. Shall we begin?
It's rewarded.
It is rewarded. Yeah, I suppose we have begun, haven't we? I think particularly within the corridors of power, isn't that what they say? The halls of power, and America in particular, because everything in America, since nothing is nationalized, everything is like profit motivated. If everything's profit motivated, people would stab you in the back for an ice cream, And to be
Well,
fair, I would stab someone in the back for an ice cream. What, sorry?
you look at it, right?
Uh-huh.
Most people, their work,
Mhm.
right?
Uh-huh.
Okay, requires them to be dishonest.
Sure.
In most job, like you can't. How many people do you know hate their jobs?
Aye, and then that's lying to themselves as well, isn't it? Whenever they come in every day, acting as if that it's all good in the hood, like.
Yeah,
I think.
because you're paid to basically protect that institution or service or system. Your loyalty, when you get a paycheck from them, your loyalty is to that system and that service.
Sure.
It's not to yourself. So yeah, you either have and not all the time. Sometimes, a lot of times, people are in completely the right role and in a role that's completely connected to their authenticity, and they can be their authentic self, and they can be themselves, and they really believe in what they're doing, and they can be honest.
Yes.
But most people have to lie.
Yeah, every day.
Every day.
Do you know what though? Do you know one of the most brazen lies someone's ever told me? Ever. It was completely straight faced, but the most bullshit I've ever heard in my life was when somebody once told me, "I've never lied. I've never told a lie in my life."
Oh,
That is the biggest lie. It was absolutely fucking shameless. And
yeah,
do you
but
know, I was young and
that's the
stupid enough to let her get
norm.
away with it as well.
Yeah, but this is the thing, right?
Mm.
This is incredible because something happened last week where I had like the biggest meltdown I've actually had in a while. But I was coming, but it wasn't like, I don't feel any shame for it. I just was completely overwhelmed. But it was connected to dishonesty.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, when I processed it, I initially, in the depths of these incredibly strong emotions where I was so like frustrated, disappointed, hurt, I went for my phone to try and contact this person and basically tell them, but my phone kind of intervened and I couldn't find their email. You know, it's like divine intervention. It's like, she's being another, stop her.
Yeah, I'm imagining like little cherubs cutting the phone wires somewhere.
Well, in spiritual terms, they say spirit guides are like, no, like there are like their fingers over their eyes. Stop her. For whatever reason, I couldn't find the email for this person.
Mm-hmm.
And I was basically going to say, I'm so hurt that you didn't, that I've wasted so much time. Mm-hmm. I've wasted so much time. I trusted you. I did something that you were supposed to be somebody mentoring me and encouraging me, and they misrepresented their level of knowledge, and they misrepresented themselves. But
yes, yeah.
But right, this is where the but comes in. I'd spent quite a lot of time with them. I'd observed them and everything. And when I really had calmed down and thought about it, I thought, they're never going to see this as being dishonest. They're never going to see anything wrong with what they did, because they can do this. They get away. That's what they do. They're paid a lot of money to do this.
Right. Yes.
So what is the point? Because I think sometimes, like, what we're looking at, a lot of people are deluded about their levels of integrity and morality. Like, the more they get into power, it seems sometimes the more morally dodgy they can be, because they have a lot to cover, they have a lot to hide, they have a lot to lose if they fall from power.
I often wonder if powerful liars know. I think that they're more likely to know, to be honest. I think people in power know the level of dishonesty more because, which makes it worse in a way, because it's it's a bit more like shameless even. Because I think there's a perception, particularly among powerful people, that you have to be dishonest to go ahead, to get ahead. And to be honest, I mean, like, given the last few years, I'm most inclined to believe that that's true in terms of politics. That to be honest, it trips yourself up a little bit. I mean,
Well, is it denial? Is it
yeah,
denial?
yeah. Well, yeah. I suppose I can't help but think of Jeremy Corbyn, who, do you know what I mean? Like, who seemed to come across, even to I think most of his harshest critics, as a very genuine and honest person. But also a lot of the stuff that brought him down was anti-Semitism, and or the people he hung around with who were supposedly anti-Semitic, and there was a level of denial there. I think it's like, because lying is a defense mechanism. Let's be clear about that. I think early on, but I think as a defense mechanism, it's been so associated with shame that it has its own defense mechanisms. So you say, oh, it's just a white lie, or you know you convince yourself you're not lying, or it's just bending the truth or whatever. Like this person I think you're talking about, this experience last week, that person probably doesn't, like you're saying, they're not aware that they're dishonest, mostly because they're not being punished, but also because they probably have little lies they tell themselves about it. I think lying used to be my biggest defense mechanism for a long time in my life, which is a very natural reflex that I had, and it
Yes.
wasn't very good for me.
Well, but this is the other thing, because we've been doing this for a few years, right?
Uh-huh.
And like, whenever we started doing this, I had a blog called Musings of a Wild Woman.
Uh-huh.
And on that blog, I was very, very honest. And that got me into a lot of trouble. So this is the other, and it's still like, that was like, people don't want you being honest. People are deeply uncomfortable with honesty and truth telling, and that is often, like, you can see that, like, so what I learned from that is I love writing, and I'm still writing, and recently I've been really delighted to get to be offered to I've got a blog now on Psychology Today.
Hey.
So neurodivergent, reflections of a neurodivergent therapist, and I'm really enjoying that. But what I learned from Musings of a Wild Woman, which ultimately I wrote for myself, it was for me to be my authentic self, right? It wasn't actually safe.
I think that makes a lot of sense, because like, I suppose there's two sides to me, to what you're saying, which is that, like, it was really good for you and very healthy to be completely authentic, and it was easier to do that in writing, but also that there was a lot of backlash. And yeah, that makes me.
There was a lot of love, and there was a lot of backlash. It was really, really, but ultimately I took it down because I thought, not everybody deserves my authentic truth. Not everybody deserves.
Yeah, and this is gonna sound mean, but not everyone asked for it as well. And by that I mean, I don't mean like, what are you doing saying that, but I mean that think of it as like exposure therapy, that, like, so if you expose, it's common in behavioral and CBT areas that, and I'm giving a very simplified version of this. Obviously, it's more complex than this, but if somebody's maybe got a phobia or if they're anxious about something, you would expose someone to it in sort of graded levels, right? And like bit by bit, if you're scared of spiders, start with a teeny tiny spider, and then you get bigger and you get bigger. But like, I read this book recently called The Coddling of the American Mind, and they were talking about American universities and how horrible it is that that people are like, want trigger warnings and stuff, and it's like, I don't think it's that horrible, because like they were using exposure principles to defend this. They were saying it's like, well, you can't defend your, I mean, like you've got to be exposed to things that hurt you, and that's how you gain resistance to them. And I agree with that, but I don't think trigger warnings necessarily undercuts that, because the point of a trigger warning is that you choose to be exposed to something. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
they
You're not
can't be
just
outraged while they were
right,
coming to my blog.
right. You know what I mean? It's like
I'm going to find my outrage. I'm going to find Louise Taylor to be outraged.
the, the point
What?
of the point of exposure in terms of like personal growth is you're meant to choose it. It's like the difference between uh it's the difference between like somebody who's scared of clowns, right? And you maybe expose them to maybe a picture of a clown, and then you have them meet a clown, and everything in between. It's the difference between that and just jumping out at them while they're shopping dressed as a clown. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They
I
got to
should have
choose
said to them,
that
they should
exposure.
have known, warning, radical eco-feminists, do not read, do not read, do not read.
Well, I think that's the thing, because they talk about echo chambers now, don't they? And
Yeah.
there's a lot of talk of getting out of these echo chambers. But then, like, and I think people both on the right and left agree on this, is that it's an endurance feat, I think, to spend that much time outside of your echo chamber, and your mind doesn't change. You just get mad. Do you know what I mean? You just see.
Yeah.
Speaking of dishonesty, you just see a shit ton of misinformation from shite sources like fucking Breitbart or whatever. And then, like on the other hand, if you're a right wing person trying to get out of the right wing echo chamber, you think like sources like CNN or the BBC are more biased, and it's horrible. So
I prefer my sources to be young. I like listening to children and old people.
What about middle-aged people? They've only just begun to get jaded.
They're too far gone. Nah, lost hope.
Yeah, right enough. I think
Until they get older.
I think though that like there was something there, we were talking about lies and being bad for you, and I think if there's like one thing that I would like listeners to take from this episode, is that each lie a person tells has a toll, and that's not necessarily like moral or karmic, though I'm not ruling them out, but mental. There's a mental toll, because whenever you tell a lie, you're slowly creating a lie cinematic universe that has to be maintained and kept consistent, and that's
Well,
that's work. Do you know what I mean?
this is a really hard one, because whenever I got my assessment,
Uh-huh.
they were saying, oh, right, that actually my difficulty to tell lies is a disability.
I think it probably helps you, to be honest. I mean, it might be hard for some people to hear, I suppose, but
Well,
like,
this is what I would like listeners to come away from. You
uh,
find the right people and they won't be offended. If the right people for you will understand your intentions, they will see, and your truth won't scare the shit out of them.
that's
You know
that's
what I
yeah. I
think
mean,
that,
it's a good way of finding your tribe, so to speak,
yes.
isn't it? Young had a quote about that where he said that uh, I'm gonna type it. I'm just gonna Google it, and then I'll edit out me googling it. Carl Jung said, loneliness does not come from having no people around, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to oneself, or from holding certain views which others find inadmissible. And I suppose that's kind of links to what you're saying about like being truthful is a good way of finding your tribe, and that people who connect with you. And sometimes maybe you can feel lonely because you're not getting to tell the truth enough in your life. I don't know, but it would often be something I would share with clients when they talk about loneliness, because in many ways we're not experiencing loneliness in the simple definition, because we are connected more than ever and we're often surrounded by people, but we're lonely in this more existential sense, I think.
Yeah, but I think it's so really important, right?
Uh-huh.
When you're thinking about all types of communication,
Uh-huh.
to think, right, I remember this a few years ago, and I was like to Lily, my eldest,
Mm-hmm.
I was like, but you have to tell the truth. We all have to tell the truth. People have to be really honest.
Mm-hmm.
And she just looked at me and raised, like, Lily is very, she chooses her words wisely, and she didn't even use the word. She just looked at me and raised her eyebrow, like, as if to say, come on now, Mum, wise up.
I do think there's,
And it was
there
at
is.
that moment that I really had to really think about truth telling, because I am obsessed, like Steph, like people who know me, I would be obsessed with finding the truth. I like research. I'd be like, what's the truth? And a lot of people would say there is no such thing. It's like, it's all perspective. It's all perspectives.
And I suppose in terms of counselling, in the counselling relationship, there that is true, that there is no truth in some sense. One of my earliest warnings that I got from my supervisor was not to investigate, because this wasn't her words, but they need a counselor. They don't need Columbo. Like I had a client who, like it was a long time ago, and obviously I won't go into specifics, but the receptionist in the place I worked at the time lived in the same area as this client, and she made like a disclosure to me about him. I wish she hadn't. I didn't know it was coming. She made a disclosure to me about him that would have basically meant that he was telling a whopper of a lie in the sessions with me, and that kind of tainted the relationship, because part of me was almost like, oh, there's a reason he's not talking about this. Maybe if we edge around it enough and I create enough safety, maybe he'll talk about it. And then, I'm not his counselor anymore. I'm investigating that claim. I'm investigating that lie. And it turned out he hadn't lied at all. I was just, I just got sucked into the rumor mill of an area I didn't even live in, and it really, but it's a good lesson.
Gossip. People think they're telling the truth, and they're not.
Do you know what? Sorry, I keep interrupting you today, but I guess I'm quite passionate about this. But I think that like something that that interests me is that people have a perception of hidden stuff being more true. Do you know what I mean? So like, if you were to read my diary, you would assume that that's more true than what I tell you, because it's private and it's hidden, and it's not necessarily true. I mean, a lot of people use a diary simply to vent, you know what I mean, and to put bad feelings. It's a place to put them, and that doesn't necessarily mean that that's truly what you are, because you can be a different person from second to second. We all can, really.
Well, this is it. Like, what that person did was they contaminated you. They planted seeds of doubt, and they did it really, really easily. Yeah,
unintentionally too. I should add, I think, because that person at the reception thought that would be useful information, and I think you could see why someone would think that, because I think people assume that counselling is all about that kind of investigative work, and I think media portrayals of counselling kind of add to that, don't they? Where they say it's like, I think maybe people think counselling is kind of like fancy, cuddly interrogation. Like, did you ever see Peep Show?
I have, but I can't remember seeing any counselling on it.
There is a bit.
Much.
There's a few episodes of different with different experiences with therapists, but like one that stands out to me is Mark and Sophie go to a marriage counselor, and Mark secretly wants out of the marriage, and he's too cowardly to say so, so his hope pins all his hope in this marriage counselor, going like, well, I'm just gonna say I'm okay, and then she'll wheedle it all out of me. She'll slowly pull out that information, and then it won't be my fault that I've ended the marriage. And he sits down at the counselling session, and the counselor says to him and his wife, so Mark, have you any thoughts? And Mark goes, yeah, no, I think it's all fine. And then the counselor turns to his wife and goes, well, what do you think, Sophie? And Mark goes, in his head, he's like, oh, they're not going to wheedle. Like, and then his wife starts going into explicit detail about his premature ejaculation. And he's like, it's horrible. I thought I was going to get to talk about why I want out of the marriage, and I'm just getting attacked. And so I think there's that.
It's really weird though, that what I find it sometimes interesting. This is where people come to counselling and they will tell you things, right, that they've often never told anybody. So they want the truth. They want to tell the truth. They want to tell the truth about their experiences or how they feel about the experiences, right? But this is where I realized, and I've realized it over the years with people in therapy who come to me, but also old friends and people I've known in work situations. A lot of people aren't honest with their partners.
Yeah.
Like the people closest to them.
Yeah.
They don't tell them the truth. And I'm as like an overspilling, oversharing font of like buckets just coming out of me going, right, I've had a thought, I'm going to share it. Like, I don't know how people do that. How they in relationships, these like marriages and all, where they're not able to have honest conversations. Like, Steph and I split up, like, and we are co-parents, right? And our priority is co-parenting, and that's it. And we've really had to do a lot of deep, painful conversations and real honest, and it's actually been liberating. It's been incredible.
Oh yeah.
Priority is our children, right?
Yeah.
That's it. But we are people who, and Steph said this the other day, he said, we know we're both really, really good people, but we're not always the most compatible, but we know really respect and love each other, right? But we've had, like, how can people be in these relationships and not be honest? I don't understand. Is that just societal expectations on steroids where people are just living?
I think it's a combination of a lot of things. Speaking as a recovering liar, you know what I mean? But like in past relationships, of course, that were destroyed by my own hand.
I haven't really always have to tell the truth in the end. I can't.
It's work, you know, like maintaining lies and like that. It's mental work. It drives you around the bend. It's hard, like, and you know, speaking as a reformed liar, there have been relationships where there wasn't the atmosphere to tell the truth. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, the one in particular I'm thinking of, the one where I was at my worst in terms of lying, was also a horrible relationship in terms of atmosphere. And when I look back, and this is not an excuse, but when I look back,
it's a
and
learning.
I try and look compassionately at myself, I think, well, is it any wonder you never felt comfortable being honest about anything? Because you couldn't. If it was this, you know, if I said to this person, I've been feeling really anxious, she would say, oh, well, that makes me feel really bad. Like, not in a warm way, in a way that makes it about her. And it's like, you know, you can't be honest about any feeling in the relationship, because it suddenly becomes this attack that, like, you're a bad person for criticizing her, when you weren't even criticizing her. You were saying that you were unhappy because of this, you know, like.
Oh yes.
So, you know, that was not an atmosphere in which you could, you know, bring honesty out of somebody. And you know, like, I'm saying that I still made the choice to lie in the end. I'm still responsible, but oh my God, you know, it's understandable. Like,
I don't think that's about that relationship. Is a great teacher, you learned a lot, because those relationships that are, like, when you look back and you think, Jesus, like, I think of a relationship where I was trying to end it for a year, and I was thinking, what the hell? Like, like, oh my God, like, what the hell were you doing? Like, you know, he kept going, no, we'll work on it. And I was like, you didn't want what, you were just
that cognitive load on must have been like
you stayed in a relationship with somebody who knew you didn't want to be in a relationship with them. Out of what? Like, out of what? What the hell were you doing? So I look at that and think, well, I'll never do that again. You know, it's not I've changed, I've grown, I've developed, you know, but I was honest with it. I was like, I don't really think that this is work, and I don't think we should be together. And he'd be like, no.
Yes.
And then I'm like,
yeah. Well, it's like you said, societal expectations on steroids is that, you know, like, everybody wants to feel like they're a good person, and breakups are, you know, in terms of the story of a breakup, they're always tinged with villainy. You know, there's always a bad person in the breakup, and nobody wants to be that. So they try and organize this Machiavellian way of, like, appearing to have tried, or to, you know, say we'll try, and you know, maybe not even really trying, because you don't want to try, really, you know. And it's I know I keep coming back to it, but it's work. It's mental work. It like weighs you down. But have you ever had
Yeah, but
to? Sorry.
sorry, go no. What you just said about Machiavelli, and that's come up a few times recently. That is definitely rewarded in society.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, The
Isn't it?
Prince is still often seen as required reading for people getting into politics, which is, I've not
Oh,
actually
you
read
have to
The
be.
Prince, but
No, but yeah, Machiavelli, that was one of that was somebody did a presentation for me,
mm.
and it was about Machiavelli. It was about the Dark Triad.
I
I
always
was
love
like,
that name
wow,
as well. It's great.
the Dark Triad. I was like,
Dark
wow, this
Triad.
is amazing. Because this is where I
Mm,
have had to get a little bit more, well, I can say firm,
mm,
and a bit more. I am really bad at spotting liars in
mm,
action at the time of lying happening. I'm
mm.
shocking. Like I will believe. I'm so gullible, and like I will
Do,
believe somebody barefaced lying in front of me. But afterwards, it's the processing, and that's part of the ASD and the
mm.
autism. So if you are mistreating me and lying to me at the time, I will not notice, but I'll catch up with you. It might take me a few years, it might take you months, but I'll basically, the processing will happen and I'll be like, that mother.
Do you not think, though, Louise, that like being bad at spotting lies is actually maybe a sign of good skill as a counselor, if you know what I mean? Because in a way, it's like so much of counseling is taking people's emotions at the very least at their word.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And like I read this. Oh, actually, yes, because I was doing a bit of research for this one. And have you ever read Skills in Person-Centered Therapy by Janet Tolan?
No, I
I
look
think
forward
it's
to it.
I think yeah, well, I'm about to verbatim throw it at you, but no, it's okay. It's fucking great actually because like, I think oftentimes person-centered therapy is seen as deceptively simple and it's like, well, just core conditions reflect, blah blah blah. And it's like actually no, there's quite a lot of depth to it, and I feel like this book really is good at getting into that. But they had a whole small chapter on it's just called Accepting a Client Who's Lying. And so she told this
Oh,
story about a client who she felt very close and connected to, and he'd been bereaved. His mother died, and they were working through that bereavement together. And one day, this client comes into her office and says, like unscheduled, and he says, like, "I've overdosed," and she basically gently manages to convince him to go to the hospital. And she's in the hospital, and she gets a phone call, and it's from this client's supposedly dead mother, and just checking up on him because she's heard he's in hospital, And so the counselor immediately goes through a crisis of faith, basically, like, is this does this mean I'm a bad counselor that I wasn't able to see through this, that our relationship wasn't deep enough to do this? But like, she really went through a few different ways of thinking about it. Um, yeah, the quotes there, felt stupid, a fraud, and challenged my worth as a counselor. She also wrote, I also realized this did not stop my love and care for him. I thought of how useful it must have been for him to live for a time as if his mother was dead, given their relationship. Unfortunately, living this way with this lie was worse. The client, seeing how much the counselor believed in his invented world, had his sense of self challenged. He could not see himself as someone who lied that much and felt his only option was to die. But he did not want to die, so he went to see her after taking this overdose. Because yeah, you talk about like maybe it's a rupture in trust in the relationship that he told this lie, but then you think that he came to her dying, and that says more about the relationship ultimately than the other thing.
well, it's a case of, right, who am I to judge when I myself walk imperfectly,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
When you find out, right, this is where my whole the situation last week where I wanted the phone intervened. There was an
Yes.
intervention by my technology to stop me telling this person what I thought and telling them off.
Hmm.
And now I am like this. Thank you for the lessons.
Hmm.
Thank you for the learning. I will never have anything to do with you ever again in my life.
Mm. Yeah.
I will never. speak. I don't want to challenge. That's not my job.
Mm.
I found out who he was. Good luck to him in life.
Fair
I don't,
enough. Yeah.
and I'm moving on. And I think
Just
he's
setting
an
a
idiot.
boundary. Yeah.
I think he's an idiot. That's it. No, I
Yeah.
think he's an overpaid, idiotic man. He's just another one to add to a long list of overpaid, idiotic men
Yeah.
who I am turning my attention 100% away from.
I like
I'm
to
bored.
consider myself an idiotic underpaid man, at least.
I like to consider myself an idiotic radical eco-feminist.
Uh,
Autistic too.
as far as labels, I'm just happy with idiotic. I'll take that.
I think I have loads of labels.
Yeah. I think like there's got to be something said for admitting lies, because this client actually did admit to the lie after they spoke about it, and it actually incredibly deepened their relationship. You know, like quite early in my current relationship, I think that was the point that really, really solidified it, was I admitted I had told a lie, and it was obviously, greeted with like, oh, that's not good, but also it was accepted warmly. And now I mean, occasionally I might lie about food. I've got a weird relationship with food, but like nowhere near in the same way or anything, like, because it really deepened the relationship too. Because like we're saying, like lies are a defense, and often they defend like intensely vulnerable parts of ourselves. I think it was like there's a TED talk by somebody called Pamela Meyer who wrote a book on spotting lies, and she said that, that often they're seen as, no, do you know what? It wasn't her. It was a TED talk by a guy called Jim Clemente, who's like an FBI lie interrogator guy. He said that often like lies are a bridge between who we are and who we want to be, and things like that. And
Well, it just depends. It depends on the intentions. Like, if, it depends on, right. Is me telling that person who I got really upset with, is me saying, I think you're not who you say you are? Is that the truth? That's my truth of my experience. That doesn't define that person. So sometimes people believe, so is lying, I don't know, there's situations where I think people say they're telling the truth and they're being mean. And I think people are lying and they're being kind. So it's sometimes I think it's people aren't connected.
Yes.
Like I can say something to you that it's about the delivery. So I can be honest with people who understand my intentions and my core as a person. They understand, yeah, she can be fiery, but she is good, good, solid heart of gold, right? But a lot of people, if they only see the passion and the fiery and the rantiness, they're not going to see that.
Sure.
So if you've got trust, you can be honest in yourself. But in certain situations, it's not safe for me to be honest. It is safer for me to tell a lie.
Yes.
Do you see what I mean?
I do, yes. And I can't.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I was in a situation, say if you're in a dangerous situation, right?
Yeah.
And you feel your tummy's going. So that's my intuition, my tummy goes funny, right? Whenever something's not safe. So it might look safe, but if I am feeling safe, my body will tell me. But my tummy goes boo, like it's like it clenches or something. And other I know other women have told me this happens too. It's a warning. So if somebody goes, "Hi, are you okay? Is everything okay?" And I want it far away from them as possible, I'll go, yep, everything's fine. I won't go, my tummy's going weird, I'm really scared of you, I don't know what you're up to, you look like a fucking dodgy shit. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. And
so in certain situations, not being honest is a protective, because not everybody is safe for you, not all situations are good for you. So that's where you kind of, I know I'm taking this to the extremes, but I think it's important to actually consider the extremes, because it's not a black and white thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think a lot of women would understand basically what you're saying there about like times when the tummy goes and you feel like you have to lie just to get out of a situation. And like,
Yes.
yeah, I feel like it's a pretty common experience for women. And I suppose men too, you know,
Yeah.
my partner said this thing recently that I found to be actually like, oh yeah, that's actually a really good point, where she said like and nearly every man she knows has been mugged, and none of them talk about it,
Yes.
and none of them talk about it as traumatic. And of course, you know, speaking as a man, nearly every woman I know has some experience of like sexual assault or near sexual assault. Like, and I mean, well, actually, they're getting better at talking about it, and I do think that's going to be beneficial for society as a whole that they are. But, like, it's a thing, you know. Sometimes that lie as a defense is completely vital. Like, it's a life-threatening kind of thing, you know.
Yeah, and this
Mm.
is it. Like it's like and work is a process that you working and keeping a job and everything is something you have to do to survive.
Hmm.
So that's where that like you protecting the institution, protecting the service, and lying to keep that job and all that there. So if you look at it, a lot of the times you've said like it's a defense mechanism. So to
Mm.
be able to inhabit a space
Yeah.
where you can be your authentic self is a privilege.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well,
I
that's
think about
actually
oh,
in that example from your woman Janet Tolan there, like that was kind of where she settled in the end there. Like said she researched the possibility of not needing any truth, but eventually just stuck with putting faith in the relationship. You know that's and I know that's always the answer in counseling, but like I think it's never truer than in this. Like I think of the times that someone's lied to me and I've managed to get them to admit it, it wasn't by threats that got them to give up the lie and be honest. It was by making them feel safe. You know what I mean? Safe to admit the truth.
yeah.
Like, and that's kind of what the relationship is in many ways, you know. And it's yeah, it's like, and it's interesting, you know, in that example, like he had spoke about wanting to be free of shame and guilt about his mother, and he wanted to be a different person in many ways. So the lie was just him trying to live that way, you know. Other parts of him knew that he was lying, and the internal turmoil is what nearly killed him more than anything. And
Is it
yeah,
people pleasing too and conflict
mm,
avoidance and also being scared to be fully seen, being
yes,
vulnerable and all of that. So they're all connected to lying
mm,
and being dishonest, because actually being vulnerable is courageous, and being your authentic self is something that is actually self-actualization,
yeah,
and something that we know very, very few people attain.
yeah. And I think like it's I love that word authentic and how it's becoming in vogue, and I just think it's so important to differentiate between authentic and unfiltered. I think something you said earlier
Yeah.
stood out to me about, you know, about honest and kind, or no, honest and mean, or a liar and kind, you know. And it's like I find that there's a lot of people in life these days who say stuff like I'm brutally honest, and I think the people who often say that, people who say that, are often much more fond of the brutal part than they are the honest part. Do you know what I mean?
But it's like yeah, you're just like, I'm brutally honest, right?
Yeah,
Okay, that's lovely. What do you mean? Like,
yeah.
what actually do you mean? Did you tell Sandra she looked like shit the other night? what
Yeah,
the, what the hell do you mean by brutally honest? Does it
yes,
mean that you're bitter and you just share the bitterness inside your head and you just express it to whoever the hell
yeah.
you want?
Being
Or
honest and
does it
and
mean you're like I would say I'm direct and honest, but that's
yes.
more my communication style, because I've I don't know how to play the game properly.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that. I kind of go, right, I have to guess here. How do you respond? Right, I'm going to just say what I think. Fuck.
Yeah. I read a quote somewhere about like ASD being like you've sat down to play chess with someone and they've brought a tennis racket, you know?
Yeah, but this is the thing. Like, I feel really fortunate because I can go, let's play tennis, and people be like, oh, she's quite funny, and they'll start playing tennis and they'll forget about the chess.
Uh-huh.
Whereas for a lot of other people with ASD, they'll be like, well, that, we said chess. And, it can be, I think I'm quite fortunate, as in I haven't really struggled as much with, I suppose I was quite popular. You know, people would have been like, you know, free spirit, I was thought of. Whereas, you know, I think that's why a lot of males get diagnosed quicker, because they're really ostracized, they're really alienated. The ASD can be, whereas I think, you know, being a woman, I was able to fit in a bit more. I was able to be accepted for being a bit different until I became a woman and dealt with really misogynistic, stupid, like really stupid, powerful, misogynistic men. That's when it became dangerous. But when I was younger, it wasn't. And, you know,
I think like
that's not relevant for a lot of men here.
I think like linking into what we were saying a minute ago about like authenticity not being just being unfiltered, that, you know, I mean, because you do morning pages, same as me, and, you know, if somebody were to judge you by your morning pages, that wouldn't be good. Like, but I think that like authenticity is about emotion as much as it is anything, and if you want somebody to be authentic, the easiest way to go about it is to reward them for it in their youth, and you know, not to bang the men's mental health drum, but, you know, that's not often the case as for young boys. Like, the authenticity, particularly emotional authenticity, isn't really rewarded. You know, you get a lot of sideways glances, or I mean, you know, grew up in the 90s where people still use the word gay to say bad, but also the word gay was used to mean anything not heteronormative and emotional in the very least. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just like emotional intelligence is just not prioritized. Like emotion, and that's another thing. They really, emotions are penalized. They're not rewarded. They're not like, they're really penalized on a lot of like. That's why I think Machiavellianism is rewarded in politics. It's very toxic masculinity. Even the female politicians, they exhibit these completely, I don't have any emotions. What? Like, that's...
Yeah. I think they can't win as well. That's the horrible thing for female politicians. Like, whatever you think of Hillary Clinton, like, whether you know, I mean, because she gets hate from all sides of the political spectrum, really. But like, there's no universe where you could say that Hillary Clinton has been rewarded for being vulnerable or honest or open. Like, whenever she was like, oh man, any biography of her, it's hard to not grit your teeth and until they explode, because it's like she's either too quiet or she's too loud or she's shrill or she's, you know, emasculating Bill or this or that or the other. Like, everything she did, she got criticized for, and, you know, like, she was, you know, I don't care if you think she's a satanic pedophile who eats kids. Like, you can't say she's not smart. You know what I mean? Like, you know what, she's kind of what, I mean, I don't agree with her in a lot of things, but she's kind of what the ideal politician in my head is. Like, a politician should be boring. A politician should be like a nerd. You know what I mean? Who just, like, you could just shut them in the office, close the curtains, they'll get everything done. You know, like.
I don't even know anymore what I thought a politician should care about people.
Well, sure, yeah. I mean, I guess in terms of
politicians,
well, yeah, of course,
and represent and care.
Yeah.
I think politics. I think to succeed in politics, you have to be cut off from your humanity, because I don't see a lot of humanity in our politicians.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Even up and coming ones seem to be groomed to be just like, I mean, I got blocked by an MLA who was inciting hatred whenever I challenged him.
Do you know what's horrible? It's like, I can't even narrow it down to which MLA.
No, I'm not. I got blocked. Like, I was like, I've never said he was open. And I would say the politicians are openly inciting hatred now with regards to the riots.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, Christopher Stafford, yeah.
That's inciting They are crimes. They are
Yeah.
criminals. They're openly endorsing criminal behavior and they're unaccountable. I mean, I have no faith in anything, but then I do have faith in people.
Yeah.
That's not true. I do have faith in some. I have met some who are democratic, but you have to engage with them and they will help you on. But I've met many who don't even follow up anything. They don't do anything. You come a concern and then they tell you what they think about it. So they're completely undemocratic. But I have met politicians who understand democracy. And actually, to be honest, it's some of the older ones who've been there a long, long time. But I do not believe in our political systems. And I do not believe that they are there for the people. I think they're there to keep power and wealth.
Yeah, no disagreement here. I've nothing to add.
We always go political. We're supposed to be about therapy.
Yeah. Okay, well, therapy.
Edit that one out.
No.
Rant. Oh my God.
No, it's congruent, it's honest. And you know, actually, we should probably talk about congruence a bit. We've not got much time left, but you know, obviously congruence being one of Carl Rogers' core conditions to a healing relationship. And people, I mean, each core condition has many different layers, but I think the first layer of that one is honesty. And then the second ones are more about emotional honesty. And like, that's always, I think, the one that people go, you can't do that all the time. And you know, you can't, but like, I think what Carl Rogers was saying was like,
scare the shit out of people.
Well, I think he meant though that your honesty and your thoughts, they shine through in everything you do. And you may be observing your client a lot, but your client's observing you a lot too, because they're talking about something very vulnerable. They're watching every micro expression and micro movement, and you know, there's projections and everything involved. And like, what you can do is to make it slightly more explicit, you know, and that might not necessarily mean telling a client to fuck off, but what it can mean is raising an eyebrow. Do you know what I mean? When they say something, like, so much can be said with these little gestures. You can be 100% congruent about something you totally disagree with by sort of going, oh, you know what I mean? Instead of going, that's fucking wrong. Do you know what I mean?
The more work you do, and we are still doing the work. This is the beauty of doing this, is because your self-awareness and your self-development is never ending, and your self-awareness. The more work you do on yourself, the less you take anything personally, or you're kind of shocked.
Yeah. It's true. That's true.
The more and more accepting you become of yourself and your shadow and all of that, the more accepting you are of others.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like that's probably. What's that?
Is that where we're going to end on
that? I mean, you sound befuddled. Sound like you don't want to end on that.
I will end saying that I don't think we're always aware of our lies, and I would consider myself an honest person, but I couldn't say that I might not be lying to myself about certain things. I don't. There might be things that I have blind spots and I'm not aware of. That I maybe lie about. I don't know. I think it's about self-awareness, and people may just be compulsive liars and they may never change because they don't want to.
Yeah, I'm gonna wrap up by saying fuck the PSNI. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm only mad. Thanks for listening to Therapy Geeks. Find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Deezer, Listen Notes, Stitcher, Podcast Index, and Buzzsprout. Give us a like or a follow or a subscription, whatever your podcast app allows. Thanks for listening.